Hello, I'm Dylan.
I'm Keon.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast with Iron. Because this month we watched Iron Man.
Written by Mark Fergus, Hawk Ostby, Art Markham, Matt Holloway, Justin Theroux, Drew Pearce, and Shane Black.
Directed by Jon Favreau and Shane Black.
And released in 2008, 2010, and 2013.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed looking up behind-the-scenes information for this. It's actually quite a bit, and it was actually pretty fascinating. Because I found the most interesting thing behind-the-scenes-wise since Bullet Time during this trilogy. It blew my mind. And I'll tell you all about it. It was in Iron Man 2, weirdly enough.
All right, yeah, I actually really enjoyed looking up the behind-the-scenes for this, too. I thought most of the stories behind the making of these movies was really interesting, maybe just because I didn't like the movies themselves too much. But yeah, the behind-the-scenes was really cool.
The number of times we've seen this, I think I've seen the first one before this twice. The second one, I've only seen once totally, but the first time I turned it off halfway through and I saw the second half on TV like 2 years later. The third one I've seen once. So.
And for me, it's 0 for all three of them until now. And hopefully I'll never willingly watch these movies again.
Bummer. I really liked the first one.
The first one was the best. It was the best.
I mean, I told you it was the best.
As is typically the case for any movie trilogy. The first one is usually the best. Especially when you watch them in a row. You're on board with the first. Although in this case, most of them, the third one's typically the worst one, too. And this one, the second one's the worst. I think they get worse.
Yeah, you think the third one's worse than the second?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we'll get there when we get to how they worked as a trilogy.
Yeah.
Because now we take you all the way back to the 90s.
Much like, what other trilogy did we do that started like 20 years before it like actually got made?
Spider-Man?
Spider-Man, I think.
X-Men?
The comic book ones.
Yeah. Well, this is a time when, because Marvel especially, DC I think had some successes in the movie industry. Marvel hadn't like
the Batman, the Joel Schumacher Batman movies.
Yeah, but before like this century, Marvel hadn't really at all.
Well, because again, the biggest properties were Spider-Man and the Hulk.
Yeah, and this is really weird. As someone who's not too invested in comic books, as weirdly enough as that is, considering I love like animation and cartoons, and usually people who do also like comic books, but whatever. It's like now Marvel is huge and DC is sort of a little more fringe or a little less successful because of the presence of these movies and stuff.
Well, yeah, because I think movies are bigger pop culture influence
they're less
now than comics.
Yeah, I mean, comic books are more niche
comic
to
books,
this day.
Yeah, like back in the 90s, I think comic books were like a pretty big pop culture influence because it was one of the few ways that pop culture actually existed because a lot of movies were... I mean, movies were less accessible back then than they are now, I guess is what I should say. And comic books were more easily accessible, so they were a lot more in the public eye.
Sure.
And that's why like a stereotypical 80s kid is like got stacks of comic books in his room, right? And so because of that, like you said, Marvel is more prominent, I guess, and DC's more on the fringe.
Yeah, and that's weird to think about because back when this movie really had its genesis in the early 90s, that wasn't the case. Marvel was, not really in the public eye as much. And, the idea for an Iron Man movie, again, came about in the early 90s, and there were many holdups.
Yeah, I actually want to add Fantastic Four as a property that was bigger than Iron Man to that list. Spider-Man, Hulk, and Fantastic Four.
Now that's just mind-blowing to think about, considering, like, the flopped... 2-3 Fantastic Four movies? Yeah.
And I've watched the first two. The first one and Rise of the Silver Surfer, they're pretty bad.
Well, that's because Marvel Studios wasn't behind them, but
Fox was behind those ones.
Yeah, we'll get to Marvel Studios and its creation.
Well, so in the 90s, Fox owned, I think, the rights to all the Marvel characters, not just, now they own Fantastic Four and X-Men, but I think, if I remember correctly, they owned all or most.
Yeah.
Back then.
And they owned Spider-Man for quite a long time, but like back then Marvel was selling all their characters just to like stay afloat.
Yeah, Spider-Man ended up at Sony, like we said in our Spider-Man episode. Yeah. So go listen to that one for the history of Spider-Man movies.
Right.
But
Sony owned Spider-Man, not Fox.
Yeah. So
wait, did Fox own? No, it was just Sony.
I don't remember if Fox ever owned Spider-Man.
It's weird.
Yeah, the Marvel rights are weird, and that's why like people were excited that like everything's kind of coming back under the Marvel Studios banner now
Right.
with.
The
I mean,
cinematic
actually, Sony
universe.
still owns the rights to Spider-Man, but they're like lending it to Marvel Studios,
Yeah.
and now that Disney's bought Fox, the X-Men rights are going to come back under the Marvel Studios banner.
Right. But there were actually, I mean, things were in the works. Scripts were written for this supposed Iron Man movie.
Yeah,
Stan Lee was even involved.
Stan Lee wrote one that was like more grounded, but yeah, more grounded, but more like cyber technology kind of influenced. So was very of that era, I guess. With the Matrix and everything was computers in the 90s.
Sure. And God, what are their Ted? What are those two writers who always work together who wrote like Aladdin and Shrek and Pirates of the
I don't
Caribbean?
remember.
Rossio and I can't believe I'm forgetting their names. Considering they're like in the top 5 of like high screenwriters who've written like the highest grossing movies like ever. But if you know who I'm talking about, then you know who I'm talking about, I guess.
Wow, what a tautology.
They actually were involved in writing one of these scripts or like cleaning up one of them or something. So it would have been interesting if that had actually panned out.
Yeah. I mean, the thing was that, at that time they had difficulty nailing down a studio that actually wanted to produce an Iron Man movie. And
Or
it
any
wasn't,
superhero movie for that matter.
yeah. I
That
mean,
wasn't like Batman.
it wasn't really until the rights reverted back to Marvel and they did a focus group testing. And the focus groups were like, yeah, we'll watch a movie about Iron Man. And that was the real impetus behind this, where they're like, okay, I think we could make a movie about Iron Man.
Right. And when Marvel Studios first came about, Avi Arad was involved for a while.
Right. He was, if you remember, the kind of overseer of the Spider-Man movies. He was, I think, executive producer at Sony during the Spider-Man era.
Right. And like we mentioned, the only two properties they were really pushing forward to begin with, because they weren't. I mean, this is even crazy to think about. Just 10 years later, considering how big superhero movies are, but like they had these two movies they wanted to push forward right away, which were Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk, and they weren't confident in like either of them. I mean, now you think
Right.
about like, all right, a superhero movie's coming out. It's gonna do pretty. Like, I mean, there's even a freaking Ant-Man movie now. There's
Ant-Man
Doctor
movie
Strange.
was pretty good.
I know,
Although
but,
I
like-
was looking back at it, I was reading the plot, and I now that I've watched Iron Man, I was like, holy shoot, it's just Iron Man again.
Well-
it's identical plot.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing of like what we're gonna get into when Marvel Studios really like makes it big with Iron Man. This is something that influences the next 10 years of these movies up until now in a huge way. And I didn't realize until watching Iron Man.
Yeah, well, so the thing was they were definitely more behind Incredible Hulk.
Because he was
Although,
more well known.
part of the reason why they were hesitant about it was because of the Ang Lee Hulk movie, which came out before
Yeah.
this Hulk movie,
Yeah.
which was a complete and utter bomb.
I've seen
and was critically panned,
parts of
commercially panned. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who liked that movie. I haven't seen it personally, so I can't make a personal opinion on it. But like, that was the reason why Marvel was hesitant about the Hulk movie, even though Hulk was like their big property, and they got like a lot of big names with the Hulk movie. They got, I had his name just a moment. What's his name? Norton. I don't remember his
What?
first name to play the Hulk.
I don't remember. I don't know.
He gets recast with
Yeah,
the
obviously.
guy who plays the Hulk now, whose name is also completely escaping my mind. Wow.
Well, here's the thing of like, and maybe this is why.
It's Eric Norton, I think.
Yeah. And maybe this is why of like they thought Iron Man would do worse than the Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
But really like in reality, Iron Man is now one of the most popular and most well-known superheroes.
Right.
And the Hulk is sort of lesser.
Well, that's partially because Iron Man did so well, and also partially because, again, with Marvel selling the rights to everything to stay afloat, the rights to the Hulk
God.
in the beginning of the Marvel Universe were with Universal. So that's why the Incredible Hulk, actually, that movie is technically part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but you typically don't see it as part of all of re-releases because distribution rights for that movie still belong to Universal,
Yeah.
whereas the distribution rights for all the rest of the movies belong with Marvel Studios. So they weren't actually ever really able to make another Hulk movie, and that was the thing. Is like a couple of years ago, wish I remember the name of the guy who plays the Hulk now, but he was talking like, yeah, we wanted to do a Hulk movie, but like with the rights and with Universal owning the rights to distributing the Hulk movie, like it's just really weird, and it's just easier for us to put character development for the Hulk into these Avengers movies and Civil War.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't the Hulk
Thor.
in the Avengers? Eric Bana in the 2003 Hulk played the
Yeah, it was
Hulk,
the Ang Lee one.
and now it's Edward Norton.
No, Edward Norton was the
Oh, currently Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, that's the guy. So Edward Norton played it in the Hulk movie that came out around the time of Iron Man, and then he gets recast with Mark Ruffalo. And I don't remember the reason for that exactly, but yeah, Mark Ruffalo was talking. It's like, yeah, it's just difficult with the Hulk rights belonging to Universal, the distribution rights belonging with Universal. And like, I think there's still like a clause in the contract that says like future Hulk-centric movies have to be distributed by Universal or something like that. And it's just kind of a mess, which is like why there hasn't been a Hulk movie. My whole point behind this was like part of the reason why Iron Man's bigger than the Hulk now is because they haven't really been able to make like another Hulk movie. And Iron Man's had 3. Plus, he's like the main character of like the Avengers movies, or at least the first one. So,
yeah. Anyway, they weren't confident in either of these two movies.
Yeah, they went through a lot of directors for this movie. Quentin Tarantino was one of them. I found out that wasn't officially attached, but like was someone they were like trying to get on board, which surprised me.
Yeah.
They should get John Favreau.
Well, yeah, and I mean part of that is because of Tony Stark. You know, he's not too typical of a superhero. He has kind of a bad attitude, and he's involved in like, you know, some pretty shady stuff.
Well, he has actual character development, so unlike basically everybody else in the MCU, a bunch of Captain America fans out there yelling at me like, Captain America doesn't have no character development.
Yeah, so, okay, I read in 2006, at the 2006 Comic-Con, they announced that the Mandarin was going to be the villain of the first one.
So, well, before we get to that, I just want to talk about John Favreau coming onto the project, because part of the reason actually why he signed on was, like you mentioned, Avi Arad was working at Marvel Studios, and John Favreau wanted to work with Avi Arad again, because they worked together on the critically panned and commercially panned other comic book movie, the Ben Affleck starring Daredevil, another Marvel property. Which
they made
really
like 2 or 3 of those.
And
maybe it was
John
just
Favreau
critically panned and not commercially.
John Favreau was in that movie, apparently. And Avi Arad was a producer on that movie, and Favreau wanted to work with him again, so he came on as director for this movie.
Favreau was in Iron Man 3 as well. He played like some random guy.
He's actually like a kind of a major character in the Spider-Man movies as well. The new Spider-Man movies, because his character serves as Spider-Man's chauffeur, because Spider-Man and Iron Man kind of like work together in the movies.
Yeah, he doesn't play some random guy. Actually, he plays this character who's from Marvel Comics. You know, back in the day, who's like involved
Happy
in
Hogan, I think. Yeah, is his name.
I don't remember. Yeah, something like that. Who's like involved in various superheroes' lives.
Yeah. He must be living the dream of him being on. He like cast himself in his movie as this one-off character. Now he's like in like every other Marvel movie, steady paycheck for years.
What if he's like the secretly like the main antagonist of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they come at you out of nowhere like in the final one? Which I'm really hoping comes soon. Really hoping the superhero bubble bursts pretty soon.
Yeah, no.
But looking at like the trailers for Avengers Endgame and all these other ones, I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon.
They make money. People will pay to see them.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've contributed to... Wait, have I contributed to that?
Have you?
No, well, I watched Aquaman, but that's slightly more permissible because of James Wan and DC, and like it was an upper tier of superhero movies,
So, like you said, they announced that the Mandarin was going to be the original villain. That's because John Favreau wanted to use the Mandarin because the Mandarin's like Iron Man's biggest villain in the comics.
Yeah. But they felt that they needed to work up to the Mandarin.
Yeah, and also
of just throwing him in the first one.
Favreau said that they were trying to make Iron Man feel more grounded and not fantastical. And the Mandarin, if you don't know, in the comics, has these 10 rings. That's why the terrorist organization is called the 10 Rings. Is these 10 rings that give him like cosmic super abilities, which is like Favreau was like, we're trying to make the first one more grounded, and like that just didn't. It like clashed with the aesthetic of the universe we were trying to create.
Right. riding off that X-Men success of like a more grounded, and Spider-Man to some extent, of like a more grounded superhero
Right.
movie. But that's also, I mean, we can get into sort of, I guess, maybe casting now because Robert Downey Jr. has come out and been like, apparently he was a fan of Marvel comics or something.
He was
in
a
his
huge
youth
like comic, like an Iron Man comic book fan apparently.
before he got into cocaine. But I mean, he's come out and been like, guys, like this isn't a real, like superhero movies aren't grounded. They're not realistic. You know, no matter how much you try and ground them, there's always going to be that fantastical element. And I think he's right.
I think he's right, but like again, the first Iron Man is like the most grounded of all all the Marvel movies. At least there's like very little that's outside the realm of what would just be standard science fiction, I guess. You know, he builds a powered suit of armor, but if you didn't tell me this was a comic book movie, this could just be a science fiction movie about a guy getting revenge on these terrorists by building a suit of armor, right? But yeah, so Robert Downey Jr. apparently Jon Favreau wanted to cast like an unknown originally as Iron Man, but then Robert Downey Jr. was a big fan, and Favreau said that one of the major reasons why he cast Robert Downey Jr. or wanted to was because of Robert Downey Jr.'s history with cocaine and drugs. If you didn't know, there was a long stretch in Hollywood history where Robert Downey Jr. was basically tainted goods because he was a drug addict and like you couldn't work with him. Full credit to him. He actually turned his life around, and like that's the reason why Favreau wanted to cast him. He's like, I see a lot of Tony Stark's journey in Robert Downey Jr. with like this addiction and then turning yourself around, and coming out of it.
Yeah, and Tony Stark. They don't really play up Tony Stark. I read in the comics that Tony Stark is like an alcoholic and stuff like that, which they sort of touch on in Iron Man 2, but not so much in Iron Man 1. But I can still see it of like this weapons developer who comes around or whatever.
Yeah. And then they cast Jeff Bridges originally as, quote, unspecified role, unquote, because that was back. They cast him back when the Mandarin was going to be the villain. And Stane, the plan was for Obadiah Stane to be the villain of the second movie, so
he's going to become War Machine,
and then they decided to make Obadiah Stane the villain of the first movie.
They achieved this. I mean, obviously different people, but they achieved this kind of with Doctor Strange, where the one guy becomes the villain, and he's going to be the villain, and next time or whatever. Next time. That's something I hate about like this stupid cinematic universe. Like next time.
Next time on.
Yeah, just have to wait 2 years for the next episode.
Yeah, James Bond has been doing this for decades. And the movie's always like, James Bond will return in Thunderball. Or, James Bond will return in The Man with the Golden Gun. It's like, gotta hype. 2 years from now, we're seeing James Bond again. And it's more like 10 years now, the rate they make those movies. But because Sony's like total disarray. But anyway, that's just my mini rant about Sony mishandling the James Bond property.
Do James Bond movies even make money anymore?
Yeah, Skyfall made $1 billion, I think.
Well, that was like, Skyfall was what, like 10, 15 years ago?
No, 10.
What was
10
the 2009
most.
one? Or like, there was some one in 2009 or 2008 or something.
2013 was Spectre. 2010, I think, was Skyfall. Or I think... Sorry, no, 2015 was Spectre, actually, because I went to see it for my dad's 50th. 2015 was Spectre. I think 2013 actually was Skyfall.
Huh.
Or 2011.
There was like a 2008, 2009 one. I forgot what it was called. I never
Quantum
watched
of Solace, probably.
Maybe. I haven't watched any James Bond movie.
A lot of them are really good. A lot of them are also really bad. But then, when they decided to make Stane the villain of the first movie, they made Jeff Bridges Obadiah Stane. Apparently the book of Obadiah in the Bible is like full of what was the word Jeff Bridges used? He says he looked up the book of Obadiah and it's full of
connections to this story in some
connections to Obadiah's kind of motivations. It's a word that begins with an R. Retribution.
Yeah. Yeah. There was some, because I mean obviously this is a production thing where Bridges wasn't supposed to be the focus of the first one as the main villain. So he's not really, I guess they just couldn't get it to work out where he has much focus. I mean, he's focused on, but not to the extent of some superhero villains or like the Green Goblin or whatever from Spider-Man.
Yeah.
They kind of write this off of like, it's
Yeah.
Tony Stark's movie, and he's just kind of there in the background, and then he shows up at the end as this villain who was kind of I don't know what you brewing in the background.
Well, so like of all the Marvel villains, he's one of the ones who has one of the better motivations. That's one of the things Marvel movies get criticized for, is because the villains have very poor motivations, like moving forward. And like at least in this one, they like fleshed it out. Like he was a friend of his dad, and he was like ousted from the company when Tony Stark took over as CEO from Obadiah, and he's like upset that Tony doesn't make weapons anymore because Obadiah, like that was his whole thing, and he's upset that if he was CEO, he wouldn't be doing this. Like there's like actual like backstory there.
I guess it's kind of lame. I mean, Magneto is still the best. X-Men First Class is still the best superhero movie I've ever watched.
Surprising. Yeah, so they made the first movie, and I don't remember a lot of the exact like machinery behind making the first movie. I did watch. There's a documentary on the DVD, a 7-part documentary called "The Making of Iron Man," which has very little to do actually with the making of Iron Man. They just kind of just jack themselves off for 37 minutes.
That's what they do on these DVD like documentary things, though.
Because I mean, they didn't really tell you, how they achieve any of this. They have some shots. There was some interesting stuff in there, though. Favreau talked about how when Tony flying through the lab, they couldn't do standard wire work because typically you'll wear like a vest and the wire will be connected to your center of gravity. And he said that that looked very unnatural for the Iron Man suit, so they were actually able to devise a mechanism where they used wire work, but they actually connected the wires to Robert Downey Jr.'s feet, so it actually looked like he was suspended from his feet, and then that way it looked more realistic, like when he was flying around his lab in that scene where he first tries out the suit, like it looks more realistic.
Is this the big thing?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, you said it was an Iron Man 2. Yeah, I mean, as for just the stuff I found online, it seems like the run up to like making Iron Man is more interesting than like the actual creation of the movie itself.
Well, the first Iron Man was like there was quite a bit of improvisation on set,
yeah.
And you can see this in the documentary. If you watch that documentary, pretty shortly after watching the movie, like I did anyway, you can actually see some of the lines are different, and they'll show you 1 or 2 takes of the same scene. You can see the line changes slightly between the scenes. Like you can see that kind of improvisation going on.
Right. Apparently, Robert Downey Jr. came up with the I Am Iron Man ending. He also came up with the idea of the sitting press conference. I guess he just randomly did it during one of the takes. They went with it. Yeah, I'm kind of skeptical about the I Am Iron Man thing, though, and they decided to roll with it.
But, like, there's a lot of improvisation there, and I think it works, actually.
Yeah.
Works out pretty well.
Works with Tony Stark's character, I think.
Right.
That was something that they were actually... Favreau and everyone else, I guess, was was kind of skeptical about because in the comic books it takes a while for Tony Stark to reveal that he's Iron Man.
Yeah.
So they didn't know like, all right, should we deviate from that, or like who are we catering to? Right? Is this movie for hardcore Iron Man fans, or are we trying to make Iron Man big among the general population?
Right.
And they eventually decided that it was the latter, so they went with the reveal at the end of the first one.
Yeah, because in the comics, they were like, oh yeah, Iron Man was his bodyguard, and they kind of allude to this with like his shield prepared statement, like Iron Man's Tony Stark's bodyguard.
Right.
But yeah, a couple other minor things about the first movie. They filmed what was it called? Lone Mountain, something like that, in America.
It was mostly in California.
To stand for Afghanistan.
Most of the first 2 were shot in California.
Yeah. And Jon Favreau was on locations like, this is a great location. You look this way and you have Afghanistan. You look this way and you have something completely different thanks to all these rock formations. So.
Sure. And I mean, Tony Stark lives in California. So there you go. But that was also the thing of like, I don't know where Tony Stark lives in the comics, but I don't think it's California. But they made that decision of like, all right, because someone said that there are too many superheroes set on like in the East Coast. Or in like New York, either in New York or in cities that are probably on the East Coast, like Gotham.
In New York, so
yeah.
Gotham's based on L.A., wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think Metropolis is New York and Gotham is L.A.
All right then,
if I remember correctly. And
But yeah, they wanted this
yeah.
one in California.
And
They got it.
Yeah, they did. And the scenes they filmed in the desert, they had some footage of this on location, and it was like super windy. And for those, like, we got 2 helicopters coming in, but it's super windy right now. So there's a scene where Stark crashes the first Iron Man suit. And he's like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get the helicopters to land because it's so windy, but we're gonna try it. So
Yeah, I didn't read about too many like safety issues with these movies.
that actually reminds me about something on the first movie, because Robert Downey Jr. did a lot of his own kind of stuff on the first movie, and he was like, it's very different when you're like the star of the movie, you're a name actor, and you're doing these things, and there's like explosions going off, piece of shrapnel hits you, and everyone's like, oh no, are you okay? We gotta take you to the hospital, gotta make sure you're okay. And he's like, but if I was just a random nobody, like, you hit by that shrapnel, just get back up and keep going. It's like, it's really different working like this. And I was like, huh, interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the first movie.
Tough business. Hollywood. Bollywood is even tougher.
Yeah.
You have to make like 10 movies every day, like the full movie.
Yeah, well, Bollywood's also really impressive because they have those impressively choreographed dances.
Yeah.
Not in every movie. Like, I'm not saying every Bollywood movie's a musical, but in the ones that are,
A lot of them are.
most
A lot of them are. Also all like 4 hours long.
So the second movie
Was announced like 2 days after the first one came out. They realized that the first one was making a crap ton of money. I mean, I think they were going to announce it anyway, but they're like, oh shoot, like this is really big, guys. Like people really are seeing this movie.
Well, because they put that sort of post-credits scene at the end of the first movie where Nick Fury shows up. So I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative.
Right, and this is actually an experiment for them. They're like, they wanted to include this in the movie, and they're like, well, it doesn't really fit, and like people aren't going to know who this guy is, and it's going to confuse people who haven't read the comics. So let's just stick it in at the end of the credits.
Yeah,
Little did they know.
Yeah.
Little did they know.
Thankfully, a lot of movies now put those scenes like in the mid-credits. So
Right.
There'll be like the stylized CG credits with all the main actors, and then there'll be the scene, and then there'll be the rolling credits. Marvel still puts extra scenes at the end of the rolling credits that are typically like not big like world-building things. Spider-Man, at the whole movie, there's this running gag of Captain America training videos for middle schoolers. It's like, today you're going to learn how to play basketball. Let me teach you how to play. And then at the end of the credits is another one with Captain America going, I see you've learned how to be patient. Well, good job. I think that's the whole thing. But yeah, they typically put the big ones at the mid-credits and like really joke ones at the end of the scrolling credits. Like Howard the Duck and Guardians of the Galaxy's end credits scene.
Even other non-superhero movies are doing this. Like the most recent Purge
Yeah.
did this, where they put it in the middle.
It's a dumb fad.
Purge.
The credits are the end of the movie. Anyway, Iron Man 2.
Was rushed.
Yeah.
They announced, and I mean, nowadays, I feel like they would have just delayed the movie, but they announced that it was coming out in 2010, and they didn't want to delay it, so it had to come out in 2010.
Right. Justin Theroux wrote the script pretty quickly.
Right. And
There wasn't as much improvisation on the second one. I think that's partially why the script's a little weaker.
Yeah, I read that both for the first one and the second one, but more so the second one, the scripts weren't finished by the time they started shooting, which is involved with the improvisation, but also just like, what are you doing? I don't think they wanted to repeat the same improvisation for the second one. Well, maybe they did.
Right.
The second one, based on what I've read, feels like they wanted to replicate the first one, which is unsurprising considering.
Yeah. Yeah, they wanted to. They decided to use Whiplash as the villain.
Yeah.
Which is.
Who was apparently way cooler in concept.
Yeah. Well, so Justin Theroux, there's this very long, actually a much better and rather detailed documentary about the making of Iron Man 2. I didn't finish it. I got up right to the part where they're talking about Scarlett Johansson, where Justin Theroux's like, originally we wanted to do like multiple villains in the second movie, and Whiplash was just going to be one of them, and we were going to have like 2 or 3 villains in the second movie.
3.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And he's like, but like time constraints and budget, we weren't able to do it, so that we had to cut it back to just one, and that ended up being Whiplash. they show some concept art in the documentary of like early Whiplash designs because before Mickey Rourke was cast, they had this, or the production designers had this idea of Whiplash like embedding intentionally the technology into himself as kind of like a mirror to Stark, who had the arc reactor embedded against his will, basically, to prevent the shrapnel from killing him. And then Whiplash is going to be this guy who was like, he embedded this arc reactor intentionally to power all the cybernetics he was like building into himself. And then part of that would include the whips.
Right. That doesn't make it to the screen, really.
No.
It's sort of just whip like armor type stuff.
Yeah, because they end up going back and redesigning the whole concept behind Whiplash.
Right.
Anyways, this is the big thing here that I discovered. Super cool.
Right.
But like, so Favreau is talking, and the director of photography, I don't remember his name for the second movie, but they're talking about how in the first movie they weren't able to do a lot of pre-visualization. So they typically, when they wanted to do an action scene or CG, they would just have the stunt double do what they were going to do, and they would just CG over him. For the second movie, they did a lot of pre-vis work. So what they did was they got trained fighters, stuntmen into a mocap studio, and they did motion capture. And then what they did was, this is the cool part. They rendered the fight scene. They rendered it like a preliminary early rendering, like a pre-visualization, very rough kind of thing, using the mocap. And then what they did was, this was like the forerunner to virtual reality. This guy, the director of photography, would have this, quote, virtual camera, which is kind of connected to this tablet. And the tablet would show him what he would see through the camera if he was looking at the fight, which was rendered in real time in this previs format. And he could walk around in this space with this virtual camera and walk kind of around this 3D object that wasn't actually in the room, but was like there on the computer. So he could like stage out all the angles.
Yeah, okay.
By looking through this virtual camera, this pre-visualization. So he would get in this room and they would render the fight out, and he was talking about how this was way more flexible than the previous form, because he could, they could run the fight over and over again, the previs, and he could plan out all the camera angles so that when they actually got on set with, Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr., they would have the whole fight planned out, like including all the camera angles and everything, because he could walk through this room, basically plan out the camera angles live in real time, run through the battle over and over again to practice, and then with Jon Favreau, basically plan out the whole thing before they even actually shot it.
That's pretty cool.
But it was really cool, and the video of it is pretty awesome, because he's just in this room at, I think, at ILM, and he's got this massive cable connected to this tablet, basically, and he just holds the tablet up, and he's on this wheelie chair, and he's standing, and he's walking around, and you can see on the screen he's the animation moving. It's really cool. Yeah, you should check it out. Because the description doesn't do the visuals justice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sounds pretty cool.
So they did a lot of previs work.
Yeah.
For the second one.
It's interesting that you bring up Don Cheadle, because what's his face was recast as
Terrence
Don
Howard.
Cheadle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rhodey. War Machine.
Yeah. There are a couple differing accounts as to why this is the case. There's actually a lot of contention behind the scenes with Iron Man 2, especially with Favreau, but we can get there. So, I mean, I read that it was just budget related things. Howard wanted more than they were willing to give him.
I think you've read more about this than me, but the story I always heard was that it was a contractual dispute, and that Terrence Howard, I think the story that I've heard is that Terrence Howard thought he would be a bigger part of these movies than he actually was, and thought he would be the lead next to Robert Downey Jr. And
he was the highest paid actor in the first one.
Yeah, because again, Robert Downey Jr. was basically Hollywood poison at that point, and he wanted more money for the second movie, and the contracts, there was a contractual dispute because Terrence Howard wanted to be basically the main character. And then Favreau and the studio were well, no, it's an Iron Man movie. And then, that's the story I've heard. I don't know how much of that is true. I don't know how much of that is obviously biased,
Yeah. I mean, I've also read that because Terrence Howard is a few good inches taller than Robert Downey Jr., they wanted someone of a similar height. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe this was also all just an excuse to like get Don Cheadle in the role or whatever.
I don't
I
know.
didn't prefer the change. I'm not a huge Don Cheadle fan. I don't think
I
he's a
like
great. I
Don
don't think he's
Cheadle's
a great
War
actor.
Machine.
I don't
One of
think
my
he's a.
favorite characters, War Machine. He's another one of those characters who actually gets character development. Not in this trilogy though, in the Avengers movies.
Yeah, that's also the thing of like the success of the first one was really like it set the stage for what the next 10 years of Marvel movies would be.
Right.
Because there's a certain like vibe to the first one that's like an Iron Man vibe.
Yeah.
Yet, in my opinion, that was seen as responsible for the success of this movie and was transferred onto all these other Marvel characters and movies as well. When
I mean,
it sometimes doesn't fit.
definitely that's definitely what happened, and that's why a lot of the kind of Marvel Phase Two movies are considered the weakest, and in my opinion, are, and some of them are just kind of bad, is because there's a very homogenized feel to a lot of those movies. So like post Iron Man, a lot of the movies got very homogenized. Part of that was because Kevin Feige's boss at the time was like, we got him.
That's how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Kevin Feige.
Huh.
His boss
It was like Phage or something.
Was like very adamant about this all being very similar, and then but that doesn't really happen until you get like after the first Thor movie. But even the first Thor movie like is directed by Kenneth Branagh. You get Kenneth Branagh, you expect him to do something like really wild and out there with a ton of really interesting visuals, but even that looks like very industrial, watered down colored palette, very generic movie score, Iron Man-esque.
I mean, and not only that too, it's like the humor in Iron Man that yeah, admittedly works in Iron Man because of Tony Stark
Right.
is also like it's kind of snarky, it's not too serious most of the time, is like also transplanted onto other movies when it sometimes shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, and that humor just becomes the default Marvel style, and it's part of the
It's
reason
infected
again why
Star Wars too.
there's a very homogenized feel to all the Marvel movies, because they all have a very similar sense of humor with very similar color palettes, with very boring movie scores. Like,
Oh, we can talk about the score for all three of
I
these.
actually enjoyed the score to the first
Yeah,
movie.
I usually really dislike like vocal songs, whether it's an originally composed song or just like a pop or rock, song that they insert in the movie. But in this movie, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it actually kind of worked
Because
because
a lot of the times it was like, what is it, diegetic? Was that the word? Well, it was part of the scene, basically.
yeah, but the soundtrack itself for all three of these was rock inspired.
They also
doesn't
didn't
feel as
pick
out of
like the
place.
most obvious picks, right? They
Yeah.
didn't pick the song that was like top of the. Okay, they used
All
Iron
along
Man,
the Watchtower for Watchmen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so they used Iron Man by. Is it Black Sabbath?
I don't know.
Okay, so they used the song Iron Man.
Maiden, no.
But like, that's the only like really obvious one they use. Like all the rest are like they use AC/DC or heavy rock, but it's not like they didn't go for the top 5 AC/DC songs and go, oh, we're gonna Dirty Deeds Done Cheap. That's the one we're gonna use. At least they used songs that like weren't that common, and I think that shows that somebody behind the camera was actually like, let's pick a song that works rather than picking one that's famous.
Right. But yeah, I mean the Marvel Cinematic Universe really started here, and they even went back and revised some of the Incredible Hulk to kind of play off of the success of Iron Man.
Right.
And why I wanted to bring this up is that Favreau kind of got the short end of the stick on this, is that he always wanted Iron Man 2, I believe, Favreau, I think, always had this idea that it would be a trilogy, which was a shared idea between him and Kevin
Feige.
Feige?
Yeah.
God. I mean, I heard his name before. I always thought it was like Phage.
Feige.
All right. So they wanted to, insert. The thing is, they always wanted to lead up to the Avengers. Ever since that first Comic-Con in 2006, people were like, "Are the Avengers? Could you ever make an Avengers movie?" And they're like, "Well, it's like at this point, no." But also, Favreau didn't want to necessarily go the route where the cinematic universe that they were trying to create was so shared that you'd have to watch the Avengers to get Iron Man, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So he felt, yeah,
threw out the window
he,
right after Avengers.
yeah. So he felt that Iron Man 2 was too much of a, I think he used this term, commercial for the Avengers.
Yeah, that's actually the reason why a lot of people give for Iron Man 2 being one of the weakest Marvel movies, because like it's basically just Avengers 0.5, because it introduces Black Widow for the first time,
Right.
and she's an Avenger, and we get Nick Fury as like kind of a major part of the movie as well.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that like part of the reason why the first movie heavily focuses on Tony Stark building the suit is because Jon Favreau's favorite part of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies were the scenes where Spider-Man was learning how to be Spider-Man, and that's why like quite a bit of that movie is about Tony Stark learning to be Iron Man.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely see the similarities there with him like messing around with flying and what's Peter Parker like failing to sling his webs.
There's an interesting part in the documentary where Favreau talks about how they had to design War Machine because, like, you know, we had this whole aesthetic that we set up in the first Iron Man. Again, this is the Iron Man aesthetic invading Marvel movies, but this is Iron Man 2, so it's kind of permissible here. Where he's like, we had this whole aesthetic we built up in the first Iron Man, and now we have War Machine. You know, it was difficult that we had to design War Machine such that it fit into that aesthetic, but so that it still was like, you know, War Machine. And he talked a lot about the challenges of that. He talked about casting Scarlett Johansson because he was like, she never had been in an action movie before this. And, you know, this is kind of the first like action movie she was in. And she was like, you know, I loved it. I did all this work and, you know, it was great. So that's about where I stopped in the documentary. There's a lot more. Mickey Rourke talks about how heavy it was to actually wear the costume. And there's like, I mean, now most of the suit is CG, but in these first two movies, and to an extent, the third one, like a lot of the suit is actually like practical effects, and I don't think you realize that until you like look at these behind the scenes things. Especially in the second documentary, they like show the Mark II suit that gets turned into the War Machine suit, and then like, they're like, "This is the suit that Don Cheadle's gonna have to wear," and he's like. And Don Cheadle's talking about it. And he's like, the suit weighs like 40, 50 pounds. And he's like, but the best thing about putting on that suit is knowing that you're going to get to take it off later on. And like a lot of it is like
Stockholm stuff.
A lot of it is practical effects, like a surprising amount of it. So, then Iron Man 3.
Well, what was something else for the second one? Oh, right. There was like most of the second one was also done in California, but they went to Monaco for the Monaco Grand Prix or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And they destroyed, I forget what it was. I forget the actual make/brand build or whatever of the cars, but like they destroyed a couple really expensive cars that were on screen for like 2 seconds, and it cost them like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow. Oh, a fun little behind the scenes tidbit. They were talking about the War Machine scene where they're going to armor up War Machine in the hangar, and they build the practical prop for the War Machine kind of chest plate, and the guy's standing there and he's like, yeah, we put some lead in here so it has some actual weight, like so when Don Cheadle lifts it up it like has some weight, because he's like, it's basically just styrofoam and plywood, but we put some lead in there so it will like have some heft, because it's supposed to be this like titanium alloy.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. They're putting like lead in it so that when they act picking up this thing, it like actually has the weight that it supposedly has.
Yeah. Like the 60s, 70s BBC.
And then we get Iron Man 3.
Yeah, and this is where Favreau's comments about the second one really are apparent and really go off the rails, because this one you really need to watch Avengers for Tony Stark's full character to come into picture. Yeah,
this is the time when Marvel started to get like really interconnected with the universe, and when the movies get like really confusing if you missed a few. Because I remember watching, I watched the Avengers movie without seeing Captain America, but then Captain America 2 comes out, and I hadn't seen that either. Like I didn't see any of the Captain America movies, and then Civil War is coming up, and I'm like, I'm gonna be so freaking confused if I don't watch the Captain America movies first. So I had to like find them and watch them. It's like after Civil War, they tend to splinter off again to be pretty standalone again, which is good. But it's kind of, in my opinion, a little too late.
There's also the thing of like, all these are I mean, it's not like, you go Iron Man 1, 2, 3, and then you have Avengers 1, 2, 3. It's like they're all interspliced with each other.
Yeah, I mean the other thing is that you have this difficulty in retconning.
God.
Well, because Iron Man, when Iron Man takes place, there's like no other superheroes, basically,
Yeah.
right? It was kind of its own self-contained thing. But then when you start making the other movies, you get Captain America, who was World War II, so it's like, okay, well, that kind of works because they put Captain America's shield into Iron Man's lab in the first movie in the background. But then it's like, the new one, Captain Marvel, set in the 90s, and it's like, okay, how is that going to work into this whole overall framework where, like, in the universe, at the time of Iron Man, people were surprised that, like, these heroes existed, right? It was like, then you get Ant-Man as well. Like, Ant-Man was apparently operating in the 60s, the original Ant-Man in this universe, and it's like, well, how does that fit in, again, to this, like, whole thing? And it's just a mess. Because that's because they couldn't have foreseen these kind of things when they made the first Iron Man. They didn't foresee they're going to make a freaking Ant-Man movie where Michael Douglas's Ant-Man was active in the 70s. So it's not like they could throw in a reference to this thing they had no idea or even like conception was going to be a thing.
Right. I mean, obviously they're planners and producers of all this, like Feige. That's so weird. Obviously, there are people in those roles, but like also this is the strain of people who write and direct and just work on these movies. Like, all right, we have to like live up and fit within the framework of like what 20 other movies.
Yeah, I think it is 20 now.
Yeah.
I think Captain Marvel is the 20th or Endgame is the 20th.
Wow. Yeah, 2 a year basically. Essentially,
3 this year.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel, Endgame, and Spider-Man: Far From Home, which has Jake Gyllenhaal. Enough.
Anyway, the making of the third one actually was delayed. It was originally announced for 2012. I was reading this blog that was talking about some behind the scenes for the second one, and it was in a Q&A format, and the final question was, is there going to be an Iron Man 3? And it just said, yes, of course.
Well, Shane Black, they get Shane Black.
Right, because Favreau didn't want to come back, and they didn't want him back either.
Yeah.
They're like, Favreau, you just stay out of this.
Well,
he went on to direct Cowboys versus Aliens or whatever that had Harrison Ford in it.
Something like that. But like, I mean, this was kind of the start of the period where Marvel started just trying to get directors who would just do whatever the studio wanted, and they get this homogenization of Marvel movies starts just after the Avengers. Let's say Iron Man 3 is the first one that kind of is the last one that's like trying to rage against this.
The machine.
Rage Against the Machine was the reference I was going for. Rage against this like homogenization, because Iron Man 3 is like, in my opinion, the last Marvel movie that feels original until Thor Ragnarok 5-6 years later. But they get Shane Black, and Robert Downey Jr. was very excited about this because Robert Downey Jr.'s career revival, I guess, had started with the Shane Black movie Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So they had worked together before, and he was very excited to work with Shane Black again.
Right.
And Shane Black, he basically wanted to deconstruct Iron Man, I guess, was his idea. He was like, I want to see Iron Man like out of the suit, because Iron Man at this point has become so dependent on the suit. He's like, I want to see what Iron Man... It's like Iron Man and the suit had become inseparable, and he wanted to see Iron Man without the suit.
Right, and part of the thing is, with the 90s couple of scripts that were written, a lot of the ideas behind that revolved around, because superhero movies weren't really big back then. It was like, all right, let's downplay the fantastical superhero nature of this and turn Iron Man more into like spy fiction or like Tom Clancy type stuff with like a spy character and who's really reliant on technology. And that was kind of revived for the third one in a way.
Right. I mean, some people like dislike this aspect about this movie, but this is actually something that would like influence Tony Stark's character for the whole rest of the universe in like pretty subtle ways. Like in Spider-Man, Tony Stark in this like big character development moment says to Peter Parker, like, if you're nothing without your suit, then you shouldn't have your suit at all.
Sure. I mean, that's a cool line, and that's also one of these things we mentioned of like, if you haven't, that one's less that one's more permissible because it's you don't need to watch Iron Man
you don't
3,
need
but
the
if you
backstory of Tony Stark to understand that, like, that's like a mentorship kind of line he's saying there, but like knowing the backstory makes it more impactful.
That's actually how it should be done, and not how they actually did it. Is just have the references be like more impactful if you've watched the other movies or something like that.
Right.
But this one was mostly shot, I believe, on the East Coast, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
I believe, or like the Southeast, the American Southeast,
The American
which isn't
Southeast.
really like
A
a
term.
region that people use, but
The former, the former Confederate states.
oh
You get,
man,
I mean, you
okay,
get good
I'll tell
tax
you
credits
after. Yeah.
for filming in Georgia. So
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Apparently, the third movie, Shane Black, only came out about this pretty recently, actually, 2 or 3 years ago, because it was, this has been this big uproar. It's like, why are there no female-led Marvel
yeah, that's a good
superhero
point.
properties? And your Captain Marvel's the first one, and Shane Black was like, well, I mean, going along with that, like the original conception of Iron Man 3 was that there would be a female villain. That the biologist who Tony sleeps with at the beginning, who gets killed by Killian near the end, she was actually going to be the main villain, and Killian didn't exist at all. She was the villain
Right.
of the movie. And he said that like the producers at Marvel and the higher ups like railed against that like really hard. And he's like, the reason they gave me was because toys of that villain wouldn't sell well.
Yeah, and if anyone who's interested in like sort of stupid and maybe self-degradatory or whatever, but I mean anyone who's interested in or who watches like cartoons, children's cartoons, or even movies like this that have some appeal with children. I mean, when they make these, they're assuming like families or whatever, even with small children, are going to see them, despite how scary they might be for the kids. But like merchandise and toy sales like control this
Yeah.
entire industry.
Yeah.
And like here's actually an interesting thing. Gendy Tartakovsky, who actually storyboarded Iron Man 2, he's like a huge creative mind behind shows like Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, and his show Symbionic Titan, which came out about 10 years ago, was canceled because it wasn't selling any toys.
Yeah.
Which is really weird because it has a cool like huge robot and like I don't know.
Merchandise owns Hollywood at this point.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that was just something that a lot of people like latched onto, that Marvel is sexist, because Shane Black was like, look, I wanted to have a female villain for Iron Man 3, but like the studio said no. And that's how he came up with Killian.
Right.
He based Iron Man 3 on a comic book storyline called Extremis, which was written by, I think, Frank Miller, who is
Frank Miller.
yeah.
Familiar name there.
And yeah, that was kind of the idea. He, again, with his grounded idea, wanted to ground the Mandarin. Like we said with Iron Man 1, he's kind of a really mystical character. And also Shane Black was like, part of the reason why I went for this twist where he was just an actor was because the Mandarin is kind of a racist character in the comic books.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Celestial toy maker.
yeah. And you wanted to go for this. I read an article once that was like, if you disagree with the twist or like don't like it because you're a big comic book fan, that should just stand as a testament to how well Shane Black built up the Mandarin as a villain in the story and then pulled the rug out from under your feet if you think it was like blindsiding you or something. Because he's like, that was kind of the point, was that it was supposed to come out of nowhere.
Sure.
So
Other than that, I didn't think there was too much interesting about the third one.
not
It came
really,
out-
although
it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
it is. And I think it's like the second highest grossing Marvel movie, or the third now. I think Infinity War is the highest, and I think Iron Man 3 is the second
Isn't
highest.
Infinity War like number one if you account for inflation
so.
or something like that?
I don't know.
Or if you don't account for inflation, sorry.
But the original cut of the movie was like over 3 hours long. And then also, apparently Shane Black, again, he was talking about stuff that he got cut. He was talking about how some people don't like Tony blowing up the suits at the end and feel like it doesn't make sense. I personally feel like it makes total sense. Like he's moving on from his PTSD riddled habit of building crappy suits. But
Yeah.
he said that in the original draft of the movie, Pepper has like this moment which he's like, I can't give up the kind of power I have now with Extremis. I can't give up this kind of unlimited sort of power I've gained. And Tony says, well, I'll give up my suits if you give up your power. And then him blowing up the suits is supposed to be a symbolic gesture to get her to give up the Extremis power.
Yeah, that could have been cool.
And like that was the original conception, but just runtime and constraints, they had to cut a lot of that out. And you instead get Tony blowing up suits.
They could have cut out some of the action. There's so much action at the end. This is like a Matrix freeway
That was intentional,
sequence.
apparently, and Shane Black, he was like, I wanted to get this really big over-the-top ending, because he's like, it's the end of the trilogy, I want it to be like the end, this big over the top thing, and he was trying to kind of bring it close to Tony's story, even though Tony would continue to appear in movies. He wanted this to serve as like a conclusion to the Tony story.
Yeah, and I
It continues
appreciate
to
that.
be.
I mean,
So
of all there are things like, and I guess we're transitioning now to talking about how it works as a trilogy.
right.
But like, there are things in Iron Man 3, like all the flashbacks to the Avengers and like the black hole and stuff like that, where it's
Yeah.
like, all right, you have to watch this other movie, but at least they tried to put a cap on like the Iron Man trilogy or whatever.
Right.
So
And then, and he tries to do that in other ways too. He's like getting the magnet pulled out of his chest and getting all the shrapnel pulled out of his chest as well. Like that was supposed to be like a symbolic, like this is the end of his story kind of thing.
I'm kind of torn on this. Would you say this works well as a trilogy or not?
I'd say conceptually it works pretty well as a trilogy, like in a higher level kind of thing, where it's like the first one is the genesis of Iron Man. Iron Man 2 is the middle part, and Iron Man 3 is like him dealing with his demons that he's gathered as being Iron Man, and him like coming to a resolution with that. I think the minutia is where it falls apart because of the stuff like you said with Avengers being required to understand the plot of Iron Man 3.
Right.
Like I think
at least the character motivation behind Tony
I think
Stark.
if Iron Man 3 it just dealt with like his PTSD without making it reference a specific event, and maybe just like his whole time as Iron Man, like just as a building thing that built on itself and got worse over time, I think it would actually work like really well as a trilogy.
Yeah, I pretty much have the same opinion. I think, conceptually it all makes sense, or not all makes sense, but like it all works well, except like when you start throwing in the Avengers things, it's like, all right, it kind of detracts from it.
Right.
And if you're gonna watch all of these all in a row, like that big action scene at the end of the third one, like I don't know, I was ready for it to be over like 20 minutes before it was over.
I don't know. That's one of those things where it's like if you watch all three of them back to back, you're going to have an experience where things that are going to come up that you wouldn't see if you just watch these movies in isolation. And one of those is that.
Yeah.
But like when I first watched Iron Man 3, I watched it in isolation. I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So.
Yeah, that's like when I rewatched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it felt like it was half an hour, and it's really like 3 hours. I remember when we watched that for this, it was like, okay, is this over yet?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anyway, Marvel goes on to become a big success, and
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like Marvel. I mean, it's obvious I don't like the way these movies went, but it's like, all right, if you just look at Iron Man 1, like I kind of like that. Or I kind of like that movie. It's okay, but like I just feel like that the success of that influenced the rest of them in bad ways.
No, I mean, I agree. I think there was a lot of homogenization. Again, I've used that term a lot, but it's true of the Marvel movies. Like, one of their biggest faults is that all their musical scores sound the same, which is not necessarily problematic, but it's problematic in a series where you're trying to build, like, recurring characters. So you would think you would want to build, like, recurring musical motifs for each character, right? At least something memorable. The Avengers theme is, like, the only memorable piece of music. And it's because it was Alan Silvestri, and he's a musical genius. But like all the scores sound very similar. All the movies look very similar, and a lot of movies in Phase 2 especially like follow the Iron Man movie plot. Like Ant-Man, when I watched Ant-Man, I was 5 years removed from watching Iron Man, so I didn't pick up on it. But like now that I've watched Iron Man again, I'm like, holy shit. A lot of the plot of Iron Man is the same. Like, guy builds a corporation, discovers a secret technology, he retires from the corporation, and his second in command takes over. His second in command wants the technology for himself. The hero is still learning how to use said technology. He gets mentored by It's like the same exact plot of the movie.
Yeah.
Captain America is extremely similar. Thor is extremely similar. Thor is one of those movies I think was actually detracted from Thor trying to build this like grounded universe, because in the first Thor's
all about like magic and
Thor's
gods
a literal
and stuff.
god, right? But in the first movie, Kenneth Branagh's Thor, they make it out like, oh, the Asgardians just have super advanced technology. He's not actually a god. It's just Mjolnir that has the lightning powers. And it wasn't until Thor Ragnarok where they kind of just let Taika Waititi like run wild. He was like, yeah, screw all that came before. Thor's a freaking god. Loki's a god. Like, forget that grounded nonsense Asgard from the previous two movies, right? And that's one of those things that I think was like a detraction from the universe that they pulled out of Iron Man that I didn't think they needed to.
Sure, sure. And I mean, just one last thing, I guess, before we talk about other Iron Man stuff, which we already kind of are.
Yeah.
But like this stuff, now that Disney owns Marvel and Lucasfilm and like whatever else they own, probably me, you, and the dog, but but, but like this vibe is even infecting Star Wars now, and that's, you know, forget about the plot or whatever of The Last Jedi. What I really dislike about The Last Jedi is like the humorous, like this is like tongue-in-cheek like kind of stuff where like, especially where Luke like brushes off his shoulders, he's like, "Man, that laser blast didn't hurt." I'm just like, just leave that in Marvel. Like,
I mean, that's Disney. Again, the humor works in Marvel, so Disney thinks that it must work everywhere else. But again, Star Wars, I think, went through the same thing that Marvel did with its whole homogenization phase. Although I think Star Wars is getting out of it quicker than Marvel did. But like Rogue One was like almost movie by studio, but like Solo was like movie by committee. Phil Lord and Chris Miller get fired because, or quote, let go, unquote, or quote, depart the project amicably, unquote, because their vision, quote unquote, doesn't align with Kathleen Kennedy's vision at Lucasfilm, right? And that's like, again, what's happened. It's happened in Marvel before. Edgar Wright gets kicked off Ant-Man, or Edgar Wright leaves Ant-Man, sorry, because Marvel doesn't want to make the Ant-Man movie that Edgar Wright wants to make.
Yeah.
So you end up getting a movie that's very similar to everything that's come before. And Solo, like, I really like Solo, but Solo's like, there's not a lot of defining characteristics about Solo. It's just everything thrown in together, and it just kind of, quote, works, unquote.
Hey, it's like poetry.
Yeah.
It rhymes.
Solo doesn't really rhyme with anything. And I think Lost Jedi had this too, like Rian Johnson, that I think there's definitely like Lucasfilm and Disney's fingerprints all over that movie. Like, compare that to Force Awakens, where I feel like JJ was given a little bit more of a free reign.
Well, that's why they're bringing him back after the backlash.
Well, yeah, I think JJ was given a little more free reign to do what he wanted instead of what the studio told him to do, and because of that, I think it's a better movie. I mean, I like Lost Jedi not as much as I like Force Awakens, though. But we'll see. I mean, that's why I'm saying I think they're getting out of their homogenization phase quicker, because they're bringing back JJ and basically going, "Okay, you fix this. Fix the mess we created."
Well, it's done. I read the...
They just finished filming, like 2 weeks ago when we record this.
Yeah.
Comes out this year.
Yep.
We will see.
I'm excited. I mean, we won't be covering it for the podcast.
Yeah, probably not
Yet.
for a while. Yeah. Anyway, other Iron Man stuff. There's the comics.
Obviously, there's a couple cartoon series.
There's a couple cartoon series. One that I didn't realize until this morning that I had actually watched when I was younger. And actually rather enjoyed it if I remember back then. It kind of reinterprets Tony Stark to be a high school kid because it's a kid's show. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah, this is weird. There's a Iron Man anime movie which is directed by the same director the guy who directed this anime series called Technolize, which is like one of the most infamous anime series. And I don't know, it's just so strange that it's from that same guy.
Iron Man's a big property now. So, and he's in like all the other, he's in Avengers, all four, I guess. He's in the Spider-Man, the first one, Homecoming.
They put him in the
Captain
Incredible
America.
Hulk.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, like 6 months later. But, you know, it just goes to show you, like, Marvel did a good job with him, I guess. Like, from their perspective, he was one of the least known superheroes, or like a lesser known one, and now he's basically one of the faces of Marvel, maybe even the face.
I think the face.
Yeah.
Although with
Spider-Man.
With Spider-Man and Captain America.
Sure, yeah. I guess those are the main three.
So
is Thor in there, or is Thor a little off to the side?
Thor's a little off to the side. Thor's awesome, though.
There are Iron Man video games, according to that template.
Yeah. Video games.
I read that the video game for the first one came out before the movie, which is really strange. Maybe that's normal. I don't know.
Probably spoiled the movie then.
Yeah.
I think I played the first one. The PSP port, though.
Oh.
So, That was the first one.
Huh.
With the second one, you fight like more than just Obadiah Stane. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's a mission when you fight a guy named Titanium Man, which is like a knockoff Iron Man.
What?
That some random guy made. Yeah, I remember that for some reason, but not the rest of the game. Anyway, yeah. So that's that. Very interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
more interesting than the movies themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Oh, we didn't give our recommendations like thumbs up / thumbs down as to whether you should watch them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you watch the first one.
I wouldn't watch any of them.
I'd watch the first one at least. If you're really into the first one, you can watch the rest. But I mean, watching the first one, I feel like even if you don't like the first one is like at this point a cultural milestone because it's like it started this whole thing.
That's and it's reached beyond just Marvel, just superheroes into other things as well. So sure, watch the first one.
And anyway, that's that. Next month, well, I'll let Keon give it away in the outro.
Sure.
If you'd like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Iron Man. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Triple Play. Be sure to leave a rating if you liked the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next month we're going to be watching the first 2 episodes because it's a 2-parter of Iron Man Armored Adventures.
And then the next trilogy we're watching is
Toy Story. But until then, the end.